when we work by ourselves, when we have to write an assignment, a paper, a presentation for the board, we until recently would normally start with a blank canvas, right? A blank Word document, a blank PowerPoint, and so on. And it would be all of our creativity that sort of puts content into it. When we use generative AI tools, this is not a blank canvas anymore. And so, we prompt a system to create something for us, but then it gives us a draft, which is effectively a prompt for ourselves. So we should start asking ourselves, is, what we're working with, a sort of a creation of a generative AI system, is it prompting our brains and our minds to go in a specific direction or not, right? So we don't talk too much about it just yet, but we are, our creativity, our thinking might be slightly narrower right now because we're being sort of fed this content from generative AI systems.
So today we're having a conversation with Professor Marek Kowalkiewicz. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Donnovan.
Excellent. Great. I'm glad to be able to get you. And so you're in Australia.
I am in Australia. It's already the following day. I think it's Monday afternoon for you. It's Tuesday morning for me here.
So we're talking to the future. So this is good.
It's looking good. It's looking good.
It's looking good. Excellent. So can you give us a little bit of your background and, just so people get an understanding of who you are, what you're doing, and what your kind of like your areas of expertise and passion are?
Absolutely. Currently, I'm an academic. I'm a professor at a business school in Australia at Queensland University of Technology. And I spent almost 10 years with QUT already. Now, before my academic career, I spent the other half of my professional career in industry. And so I worked for SAP, the large enterprise software organization, and I was leading one of the research themes within SAP globally, as well as was responsible for setting up their machine learning lab in Singapore, and did a couple of other things, including SAP in Palo Alto. Before that, I worked with Microsoft Research in Beijing. And so my background is mixed. I have a very, very strong and good understanding of technology, including artificial intelligence and machine learning. But also these days, I spend a lot of time in the academic world trying to understand what's happening and build new frameworks to help organizations thrive in this new challenging world.
Yeah, indeed. So, when you're saying new and challenging, I guess we can jump right into it and just talk about what we're seeing in the world of AI. There's so much advancement that we've seen happening in such a short period of time, right? Like, what are your thoughts just around the pace of advancement and what that means for society and what that means for businesses?
Oh, look, the last 2 years or so have been absolutely crazy for businesses and for the industry world when it comes to artificial intelligence. AI is not an entirely new concept, right? It has been around in business use for at least 20, perhaps 30 years in various forms, but it's been the last couple of years with the rise of generative AI and the much easier access to these technologies that we've seen that the rise of applications. And so what this means for business is that suddenly I have conversations with CEOs, managing directors, and board of directors who say, hey, we have those individuals who automate their functions, who start to performing tasks so much better. We call it shadow AI, shadow artificial intelligence. And this is one of the biggest challenges for organizations at the moment, how to manage that. They don't want to stop it. They're happy that their people are being creative and trying to be more efficient, but that needs to be managed, and a lot of organizations are now struggling how to do it. So that's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah. So how do you see the role of the CIO and other C-level executives evolving in this new era, right? Because we were at once at a point where it was like, and I think I saw you speak about this once, where, we were always managing people, and we're still managing people to some extent, But right
Yes.
now, we're also managing processes augmented by technology, and everything is shifting. So what is that role? How do you see the role of the CIO and other C-level executives evolving?
That's right. So, I've written a whole book about it. It's called The Economy of Algorithms, AI and the Rise of the Digital Minions. And in this book, I'm making a claim that we're starting to see an emergence of a new type of agents, an economic agent, an entity that is able to perform functions in a way that is similar to humans or organizations in the markets. And so, to your question, what we're seeing in organizations is those individual software agents, call them bots, I love to call them digital minions, that now need to be managed in very different ways, because those agents are managed by individual employees. But also, back to your question, now C-level executives need to look at the workforce and realize, hey, it's not only humans that we're managing, but we're managing these individual software entities too. And, what do we do about that?
With this, so how do organizations foster a new culture of innovation and experimentation while this is happening, right? Because you can't say, like, there's certain schools here in the US where they are completely shutting down AI, right? So they have all these software detection tools that are saying that we can stop any type of essay and catch any type of work that's submitted by a student with 100% accuracy. I don't think that's the right way to go, right? So how do organizations foster a culture of innovation and experimentation, and while staying ahead of the curve, while being true to the work? And this is on the academic realm as well as in the business realm.
Yeah, look, it's probably all about going head first into this revolution, if you will. And one of the things that we're doing at our university, at Queensland University of Technology, is working with students to help them understand how to use those generative AI tools. So specifically, yes, there was this initial knee-jerk type of reaction where the university was asking itself, should we ban the use of those tools? But thankfully, we had a relatively short conversation about it, and the answer was no, we shouldn't be banning them. Instead, we should work with them. And so by now, it's almost an expectation from all of our students, and certainly an expectation from all of my students at the university, that those students use generative AI tools for their assignments, right? So they are expected to use them. Now, what's the background of that? We work with students and explain them how to work with generative AI. What are its limitations? What are the things that they should consider when working with them? And then we invite them to use them as this sort of additional tool in their tool set. Interestingly, for my MBA students, if they don't use generative AI tools, I asked them to provide an explanation why they decided not to, right? So it's really flipping it upside down and saying, hey, you're expected to use the tools, use them to the best application or to the best result. If you're not using them, that's fine, but tell me why you decided not to use generative AI.
Yeah. So when you see this, we're at this point where we're having these conversations. So what do you think are the main ethical and practical considerations that need to be addressed when using generative AI in both these environments?
I think there's a lot of people who already talk about the challenges of bias in those systems, so I'm not going to repeat those messages. Instead, I'm going to highlight two aspects that I consider very important in both the university context, but also in commercial context. So first of all, a lot of users of generative AI tools don't fully understand what happens to the data that they provide to those systems. And so specifically, we should be more concerned about the intellectual property or also privacy of the information. we know that some systems like ChatGPT by OpenAI with the lower, the sort of non-enterprise levels of subscription, they do say that they might use the data that you provide through prompts in refining their system. So imagine some of your proprietary information emerging a few years later because it sort of got embedded in the system. So that's very concerning, both for industry world, but also for academics, where often we deal with data that shouldn't be exposed externally. So this is one aspect that more people need to pay attention to. The other aspect that I don't think we talk about just yet is in all areas of creativity, and we might expand on this sort of creativity space later as well. When we work by ourselves, when we have to write an assignment, a paper, a presentation for the board, we until recently would normally start with a blank canvas, right? A blank Word document, a blank PowerPoint, and so on. And it would be all of our creativity that sort of puts content into it. When we use generative AI tools, this is not a blank canvas anymore. And so, we prompt a system to create something for us, but then it gives us a draft, which is effectively a prompt for ourselves. So we should start asking ourselves, is what we're working with, a sort of a creation of a generative AI system, is it prompting our brains and our minds to go in a specific direction or not, right? So we don't talk too much about it just yet, but we are, our creativity, our thinking might be slightly narrower right now because we're being sort of fed this content from generative AI systems.
Look, and I think at some point in time right now, there's a heavy emphasis on prompting and prompt engineering. But I think as these systems get smarter and they become embedded in what we do every day, the prompting might not even be there anymore. It's most likely that it's going to be done in advance, right? In terms of the system understanding your needs before you even ask for it.
That's correct. Now, this is almost a philosophical question. Is this what we want, right? Because in a way, that prompting, while, perhaps mundane, perhaps taking our time, but it gives us some control or some influence of those systems, right? And the less and less of that we have, the more of our own autonomy we're sort of ceding onto those systems, right? In some cases, that's absolutely fine. There are areas where I don't want to be prompting systems, at all. But then there will be areas where I would like to maintain my autonomy and sort of my direction over it, right? So it will be interesting. Perhaps in future we'll have a slider and we'll say, this is how much control I want to have over the system, or, this is how much I want.
Yeah, and the slider concept is an interesting one, right? Because if, we have all these, the next wave of laptops and handsets will have AI embedded in some way, shape, or form. We know that that's coming. But it also will make our lives a little bit easier, right? So then, for situations like this, once this is done, this device will be able to just say, do you want to send Marek a thank you note? And it will probably have it pre-written, right?
Yes.
Or a good portion of it pre-written. So whether it's my mobile or my laptop, same thing if I went to a birthday party, or same thing if someone bought concert tickets and emailed them to me, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it will bring a certain level of convenience for us in our everyday lives. And on the business side, it really will bring a level of advanced thinking and processes, especially when you start looking at like automated business processes. So I think that's going to be interesting, because then businesses, in a sense, could start to almost run themselves.
You're right. So in a way, we're talking about this sort of traveling across the almost like stack of various sort of granularities of activity. So on the lowest level would be that sort of the task that you want to do, please write me a thank you note to Marek, right? The next one would be where you prompt a system to say, hey, make sure that all my interactions with my, with the persons that the people that I interview are I don't know, civilized or nice and so on. And the system will recommend, hey, maybe, you know, it would be good to have a thank you note, and I'll draft the thank you note for yourself, right? And then for you. And then, you know, the next level would be perhaps where you just from the system and say, help me be a good person, right? And it'll sort of analyze what's happening around you and make those suggestions. That's interesting, right? When we think about this kind of scale from the most granular activity to the top activity. And then, you know, you did mention that it could also extend to organizations, right? So in fact, we do have those organizations, distributed autonomous organizations, or DAOs, in the sort of crypto space, where based on smart contracts in Ethereum blockchain, you can create entire entities that behave autonomously, and they have the legal entity of an organization. So we're starting to see an emergence of autonomous organizations. I'm not aware of the use of generative AI in this space just yet, but it's perhaps just one step away.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we'll be able to see, like, I think you have so many different processes or so many different steps that it takes from bringing a product to market to sourcing it, right? So we could legitimately, in the next few years, see a system that's constructed to find the best price for raw materials and goods in the market, purchase those items, bring them into the factory, and manage every step along the way, and find the optimal pricing based on the economy and market conditions and locality, and that will bring a ton of efficiency, right, into the entire process. So we could see a lot. We could feasibly see that in the next few years. It's not too far away from that.
Absolutely. That sort of autonomous supply chain management is something that we're definitely seeing as possible, to emerge. Now, it is my duty almost, as an academic, to also highlight that, in those cases, while technology might be there will always be some surprises that the system hasn't been prepared for, right? And we've seen it at scale during the COVID pandemic, where a lot of machine learning models that were trained to, predict what might be happening in the markets basically failed because the whole economy started to behave very differently, right? And in my book, I talk about machine learning models try to predict the prices of houses and how suddenly, as you and I know, during COVID, we all changed how, what we valued, right? Suddenly houses outside of a city were in more demand than those in the city. And, those models weren't trained for it. So this calls for us humans to remain in the loop all the time. Those systems will be like you were describing them, Donnovan, but we will need humans to step in if there's some unexpected change in the economy or, in the markets, which, the systems are not prepared for.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because COVID absolutely showed us a lot about our systems, our processes, our expectations from ourselves and from the workplace and from society. There was a lot, right? And then I think because of that, now we're starting to see the whole work from home adjustment. And I think because of that, we're probably going to see more of an acceptance of the worker that isn't there. And the worker that isn't there is automation. It is LLMs.
Absolutely. That's a good point. That's potentially a bit scary for those of us who work from home, who are only visible to our colleagues or managers through emails, and maybe sometimes we show our face in a call. The more of it gets automated, the more challenging our tasks might be, or maybe the more exciting there will be. A lot of tasks that are automated are typically very dull, sometimes dangerous, and so perhaps we want them to be automated. I have plenty of stories in the book of employees who self-automated themselves, right? Who automated their own tasks, and initially they were a bit worried to share this with their managers. There is one case in my book of an employee who shared that, and then they got fired for that. But frankly, this is a very exceptional case, and I use it to highlight the immaturity of the manager in this situation. Because in reality, and look, I say it with full confidence. I speak to a lot of CEOs and managing directors about it. In reality, business leaders hope to have more employees who can automate themselves, because this type of workforce helps them grow the business, right? So it's actually a win-win for both sides. But I think we still need to understand, we still need a tiny bit more of the sort of AI automation literacy in the business.
Yeah, and we're actually going to put a link to the book in the video when we post it. So if you're watching this and you're wondering what this is, you will have an easy way to purchase it. It's on Amazon in the US, and I would imagine Amazon everywhere else around the world.
Thanks, Donnovan. That's right. So that's the Australian and Australasian version of the book, and this is the US and UK and the rest of Europe version of the book. They look slightly differently. I'm very excited about them, Donnovan. This is the first book that I've ever written. And so this has been a bit of a journey for me, and it's doing quite well on Amazon. Made it to #1 in a number of categories. So it seems like people enjoy it. So hopefully the readers will enjoy it too.
What are your thoughts on the role of partnerships and collaborations between large companies and fast-moving tech startups in driving this digital transformation?
Absolutely crucial, no question about it. Large corporations or incumbents, sometimes we call them, those organizations that have been successful for a long time, are often struggling to reinvent themselves, are often struggling to quickly adopt new types of technologies or innovation, including generative AI right now. And so often those large organizations not just don't have the right answers, but they don't even know what questions they should be asking about the use of new technologies. And those partnerships with smaller, more nimble technical businesses are going to help them immensely by helping them explore the scenarios and applications of new technologies. My team, I do run a small team at a university that's a bit like a consultancy house. We help large organizations with their digital strategies, and we are completely flooded with requests by large organizations to help them understand what scenarios of those new technologies are. So, in the business world, that's an interesting one to think about. In the business world, the CEOs, the MDs are saying, hey, we get it. There's a lot of hype around generative AI, but we need to see the value in it, right? We're not going to just play with generative AI for the sake of playing. We need to see, what the scenarios are, right? And this is where the help might be of use.
Yeah, I agree, because I look at, and I think when you look at the innovation and the pace of innovation and the varied areas where we see a lot of this development, it just makes sense, because corporations are never going to be able to hire, or in rare cases will be able to hire these specific talents, these talented individuals at the rate and at the level and in some of the verticals in which they innovate, right? So I think big companies will be able to create interesting, maybe like products here and there, but in order to gain and develop a significant roadmap, that gets harder, right? You need to be a very big tech company to do that. So in some instances, I think it just makes sense to have different partners and partnerships that you set up to help to augment your roadmap and be able to provide innovation for your internal needs as well as your external needs.
Absolutely. And look, and that's fair, right? There's a lot of large organizations who do not need to become technology developers, right? And so those partnerships make a lot of sense. and it's almost better to outsource or leave that the type of expertise to another organization as long as your people within your organization have enough AI literacy to be able to be a partner, right? Not just a customer, but a partner with that technology organization. And that's the word that you used in your initial question, right? It's all about partnerships. But to be a partner, you need to kind of be on the same level, at least partially in your organization. At least you need, a few people who are able to talk to technology experts and, glue those two organizations together.
So with that, based on your research and your experience, what are the critical success factors for companies looking to leverage the power of data and AI to drive accretive additional business value?
Finally, I'll start with people. I know there's a lot of technical aspects that we need to talk about. But in my research, I have seen that the organizations that are successful in this journey have one thing in common, and that is the leader, whether it's the CEO or a managing director, someone who's on top of the organization, the leader who understands the need for the entire organization to transform, and the leader who has that passion and energy to do a lot of storytelling and share their vision of that new transformed organization. Without this type of top level leadership, there's a lot of organizations who will say, we can do some grassroots innovation and so on. And yes, they'll be successful in some pockets of the organization. But if you want to transform the entire organization, you really need that understanding and that drive from the leadership, right? From that, everything else follows. And again, there's a lot of framework that suggests what needs to be done. I will say perhaps two things, or maybe that's one thing, and that is, those successful organizations, they understand that they're acting in an area that's not just their industry, but it's also the technology space. So any organization, whether you're a house builder, a car manufacturer, a hairdresser, they need to understand that they're also a technology company in some way, right? And with that, assumption, all the employees, all the staff will realize, well, we need to start collecting as much data as possible. We need to try to figure out, can we use algorithms, predicting how our customers behave, right? And if I'm a hairdresser, I can start collecting data about my customers and start making predictions, right? Once we understand that we're also a technology company, everything else follows, right? So the second thing that I wanted to mention that I said maybe it's the same thing, it's what I call datafication of a business, right? It's all about trying to make sure that everything I do, I collect data signals about it so that I, can do a lot of data processing on it later on. Of course, we need to be aware of, what data we collect, why we collect it, whether it's personal data and so on. So there are some boundaries to what I'm saying here, and some of them are legal, some of them are ethical. But once you stay within those boundaries, that's critical. So I would say people and data are the kind of, the CEO and the data that you collect are the kind of the critical aspects here. Everything else follows. And we could have a sort of like the next 10, 20 minutes talking about technology, but that's what a lot of people talk about. So I just wanted to highlight those two.
So you also talk about generative curiosity. Can you expand on that and talk about how it can be applied in different settings?
I spend a lot of time trying to understand what is curiosity, Donovan, and sort of going step by step. But there's this very natural curiosity that we all have had. It starts when we're children. We're just curious about everything, right? And I'm always asking myself, how does it apply to a business? So in the book, I talk about this type of businesses that that explore everything that they don't know, right? If they don't know an answer to a question, they want to explore it, right? It's sort of an interesting way, but it gets further, right? So next step of that is design curiosity, where you apply techniques like design thinking to ask the right questions, find the right answers. Then some academics use what is called retrospective curiosity, where once you've collected a lot of data, you can look into the data from the past and you can find experiments in that data. Right? So rather than trying to run experiments by yourself, you actually look for experiments that might have happened, right? Not always easy to find them, but once you do, you find them and you can sort of understand what happened as a result of that experiment. That's a space that a lot of academics look into. Generative curiosity, the one that you asked about, is the fourth one in that ladder of different types of curiosities. And this emerged with generative AI. And a generative curiosity is when you sit in front of a screen and you say, you know what, I don't know what additional questions I might have, but this is the space I'm exploring. And then you prompt the system and say, please tell me what other questions I should be asking, right? So that curiosity is being sort of created by an artificial intelligence system. And then you take those questions and you might, drop some of them because they're not good enough, but then some other ones you start exploring. So that's what I call generative curiosity. This is one where we run out of questions ourselves. And, in the olden days, this would be the end of our exploration, the curiosity block. But now I can just tell the system, hey, tell me what other questions I should be asking. And then you get those questions. I use it a lot in my research, in my commercial work. I use that curiosity crutch a lot. It's not always perfect, but it keeps you going. And as you know, Donovan, sometimes it's all about taking the next step, even when you feel like you cannot, right? So that's when the systems are helpful.
So what other emerging technologies or trends are you most excited about right now, and why?
That's a good one, right? So there's obviously a lot of hype around generative AI, and I think a lot of people are asking them, so how does it translate to, some practical outcomes at the moment? So, there's a lot of questions there. I'm specifically excited, or maybe curious. I think curious is a better word here, a better word here, about this kind of new term that's being used of large action models. So taking, large language models to that next step. It's not just about creating the next most probable word in a sentence, in a paragraph, in a document, but it's more about trying to guess what is the next action in a set of actions that we're performing, and then performing that action, right? And that's what a lot of new AI hardware type of tools are trying to explore, right? And those actions could be actions in the physical world around us, but those actions could be also in the digital online world. So on our mobile phones, in our emails, and so on. When you mentioned that example of a thank you note to your interviewee, that's that could be the next probable action, and once it's performed, that's there. So this is something that I'm very curious about. With my research bias, I believe that those large action models will require tight collaboration with humans who will make sure that those actions are, they're performed, they're automated, but these are the right actions, right? So we might still need that human oversight. But yeah, I would say large action models is my choice of a technology that I'm curious about. I'm not yet sure whether I'm excited about it, but I'm very curious.
Yeah. There's a lot of fun stuff that could be coming out of that, especially with the. I ordered one of the Rabbit R1s. So
did you get it already, or?
Still, I just didn't get it yet. I'm waiting for it. I think I should be in the first batch, maybe. So
okay,
early May.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that's one of them, right? I like the Rabbit because it's adding according to all of their marketing materials, it's adding this additional layer on top of your devices, right? So it's kind of cool, right? So I'm still going to have my phone and I can use it as like a human would, right? But I can also have this digital minion that now will, be able to use my phone and perform actions. It's almost like giving my phone to another person. Like when I'm driving, sometimes I'll ask my wife or so. It's like I'll give her my phone. It's like, hey, can you text this person or so? So it's almost like that, right? You have this other person doing things for you. That's interesting. So once you have it, Donovan, because we cannot get them easily in Australia. Once you have it, I really need to talk to you, and I need to see how you're using it, what you think about it.
For sure, I will give you an unboxing and a demo. So we'll see.
I love it.
So in your view, what are the most pressing policy and regulatory issues that need to be addressed as we move further into all of this?
An interesting question. And, policy by design is always late, right? You don't really want to have policy that's like too proactive, that sort of regulates issues that haven't emerged just yet, right? That doesn't happen. Really policies, are implemented when you see that there's an issue and there needs to be an intervention of, a state, right, to help manage a particular situation. From this perspective, some of the challenges that we've seen that need to be regulated, in my view, are specifically, challenges in the large language model space, in the intellectual property space, right? So most large language models are trained on massive amounts of data, and the big players that are in this space are looking all around to find anything that they could sort of put their hands on that's made by or written by humans that they could feed into the systems. And so we've seen those cases like, one of or a number of large language models have been trained on a database called Data3, which is a database of stolen books, right? So there's, a lot of authors around the world right now who are either unaware that their books were used to train large language models, or are aware of it but can do nothing about it, right? So that sort of, that intellectual property conversation needs to be there, needs to be happening. The other one, perhaps that I would flag, now I'm not sure if it's on a policy level or some sort of industry regulation level, like that's kind of one level below it, is the issue of annotating the outputs of generative AI systems, right? And I don't mean the kind of annotated so we can detect that someone used a generative AI system. I mean it in a way that we should be annotating these outputs so that generative AI systems do not use those outputs to further refine and train themselves, right? And you might have heard me, Donovan, talking about it. I call it the bot shit avalanche, right? The case where a bot generates content and then another bot gets trained on this content, right? And you get this kind of, endless cycle, which leads to very weird mutations in those systems, because suddenly, they're learning not on human content, but on bot content, right? So bot shit is one term for it. Academics also use MAD, which is short for model autophagy disorder. Autophagy meaning that, the model eats itself, right? And so going mad or, having that model autophagy disorder is an issue. The solution would be annotating the content so that bots know that this is, a bot generated content. Whether it should be regulated on a state policy level or industry, I'm not sure, but definitely something that not a lot of people talking to right now, but that needs to be addressed.
What advice would you give to business leaders who are trying to navigate the complexities of this landscape as they move forward with trying to stay innovative but staying somewhat cautious?
This is a timeless question, Donovan, I think, and people like you are doing so many great things to help executives. And so I'm going to sort of, piggyback on what you're doing, Donovan, and say, hey, to stay relevant and to stay on top of things, you just need to be curious, and you need to be in places like here, listening to people like Donovan, interviewing his interviewees, and asking questions that perhaps you always wanted to ask, but never, could never find a person to answer those questions. So it's all about being curious and following conversation all the time. It's often hard to find the right piece of information. So it's good to rely on people, on organizations, on places that do collect it. So yes, stick around podcasts like this one and just listen to those conversations all the time. Find a couple of sources of or magazines or sources of information. Maybe if you're a CEO, maybe that's simply something like Harvard Business Review, where they will occasionally have a post about artificial intelligence, though do not expect Harvard Business Review to go into the depths of it. So you might go want to go to something like Wired as well, and just read those those articles all the time. But it's all about being curious and reading and and listening and talking to people, right? The answer is not in just talking to vendors, what is the newest product and so on. It's all about having this broader conversation. But also there's another advice that I have and that I give to every business that I can. Think about what I call a sidecar approach. So, a motorcycle and a sidecar. And think about your business as the motorcycle, the kind of the main engine, right? That, keeps doing what it's doing. But have this sidecar, which is going together with your business, where you continue experimenting with new technologies. So in practice, what it means is, imagine you have a person in your team who is tasked with a particular activity. Ask this person to, at the same time, use, let's say, a generative AI tool to try to perform the very same activity. It initially might take a bit more time, just like it takes a bit more energy to kind of pull that sidecar. But at some stage, you might realize that the generative AI tool is better than what the person is currently using. So in a mid-term, this type of experimentations might lead to sort of bringing completely new ways of doing business into your organization. So yeah, that's this, talk to people, listen to people, read from people, but also have this sidecar approach in the business. And I think this is one strategy to stay relevant in the age of artificial intelligence.
That's great advice. So essentially, be a sponge and be a magnet.
Be a sponge, yes.
All right. Professor, thank you so much. This is great to have you here, and I'm looking forward to us doing this again. And I will make sure that everyone understands that you have a book that they should read, and that should be part of their learning curriculum.
Thanks so much, Donald. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Thank you.